Hello there. Today we are going to create the popular Wordle game inside Java using Java SWT and Swing components. Here is a little sneak peek of how the finished game will look like. Excited? Let's get started. So first we will create the game class itself, Wordle game, and initialize it with the main method. Next, I am going to define an inner class which represents the word characters. Okay, so I'm going to name the class word panel, which will extend jpanel. I'm also going to create the default constructor so that I can initialize the SWT components here. Oops, spelling mistake. And now I'm going to define an array of labels. So the idea is to split up the word into individual letters, and each letter will be displayed in one of these J label. Okay, so I'm going to call this array word columns and define the size as 5 because the word game will be having 5 letter words. And inside the constructor I am going to use the simple for loop to initialize each individual labels inside the array. Next, I am going to use the set opaque method to set the opacity of the label, and then I have to define the default layout for the panel. So I will be using grid layout, and you can set the layout using the set layout method. Define the grid layout having 1 row and 5 columns. So each of these 5 label boxes will be added in a single row. Then I have to create a method so that I can set value inside this panel. So I'm going to create a method set panel text which will contain 3 input values. First, the individual letter, next its position, and finally the background color. Then I will simply call the array this dot word column, and the position will be passed as a parameter, and using the set text method will assign the character value. Now using the set background method I will change the background color. The reason I am changing the opacity at line number 18 is that only after setting the opaque value as true will the background color be enabled. Okay, now I am also going to add the border color. If you remember, the border will be having a small black border, so we have to define a new variable border, black border. I will call it black border, and use the border factory to create an instance. And inside I will use the create line border and pass the color gray. Yeah, I think it's better to use light gray as well, since gray will be very similar to the default color of the SWT. Now we will be having each label having a default border with a light grayish color. Now I am going to define another inner class, and this time this will be used to accept the user inputs. Okay, so basically it will be having a text field and a command button. So this will also extend JPanel, and inside I will first create the user input field. Oops. Next I'm going to create the command button, J button should be okay. Then generate the getters for the same. Finally, inside the constructor, initialize both the fields. First, I will set the layout again as the grid layout, this time with one row, two elements, one for the text, one for the button. Then define the initialize the user input using new JText field, and command button as J button, and also provide the button text as OK. Now I am going to, so the first word panel will be having the word, and the user panel will be used to accept the user inputs. Okay, now inside the main class Wordle game, I will define a game frame which will hold the entire game frame and an array of word panels. So there are 6 user entries acceptable, 6 tries, so there will be 6 words. So we need to have 6 word panels. So I will define an array with the default size of 6. Okay. Lastly, I will define the user panel as well as a member variable. Now I will create a string for the generated Wordle string. and I will maintain a count which will be useful to indicate the position in the word panel array. Now I'll create the default constructor and initialize each of the SWT components. First, the game frame will be the JFrame instance, and I will pass the game heading Wordle. Next, I am going to set the size for this game frame. I am choosing 300 by 300, and then I am going to add the default close operation so that the game will stop once I hit the close button on the frame. Next, I will add the layout. Again, I prefer the grid layout. So this time we should have 7 rows, each having one component. Okay. Now I'm going to enable the visibility of the game frame using set visible. Then in order to create the game frame at the center of my system, I will use set location relative method and pass in null. Now I need to initialize the word panel array. Again, I am going to use a simple for loop of 6 to initialize all 6 individual word panels. So word panel array of I equal to new word panel, and then game frame dot add the array. Then outside the for loop, I am going to add the user panel, but before that don't forget to initialize it, otherwise you are going to get a null pointer error here. So first initialize the user panel using new default constructor, then add it. Just see the output. See, it came, but only after resizing you will get to see the text component. This is sometimes happening, and one easy fix I found is you can ask the JFrame to revalidate itself so that all the components are reinitialized. Now that issue is solved. So our layout is there, but for the user input no action is being set. Now to set the user actions or accept the values, we have to implement the interface action listener on the main class itself. So our main class will be acting as a listener, and this will prompt us to implement the unimplemented method of action performed. Okay, so here this method will be called each time the command button will be pressed. So for now I am just going to print the command button is being pressed and check if that button command is okay. And if it is okay, then I will just sys out the text field value. word panel is ready and user panel is also ready. And in order to enable the command button action, I have to add our action listener into our user panel. So if you remember, the OK button is inside the user panel. So user panel dot get OK button dot set action listener, and I will pass the class instance itself. Okay, now let's test it. Okay, whatever I am typing, it is coming in the console. So yeah, we have fixed that part. And now we need to move on to the default Wordle string. We need to generate a Wordle string. So inside the main class, I will create a method to fetch the Wordle string, a 5-letter Wordle string. So we'll call this method get Wordle string, which will return a string. Now I'm going to use the path and define the location of a text document I have created by copying some words from the online dictionary. So this path is already inside the project. See, this is a simple word text I have created by copying words from an online dictionary. I will also attach the link for the same in the description if you want to copy it, or you can create your own. Next, from the path, I will use the files dot read all lines to give a list of all the lines inside the file. So first I will create a word list and initialize it. Next, using the read all lines method, I'm going to fill the word list with all the lines. So read all lines will throw a IO exception, but for now I'm going to handle it within this section itself. Now, in order to pick a random line from the file, I'm going to use the random class in Java and define a random position from the array list. So to fetch the position, we use random dot get next int actually, and here we have to specify the size. So the size is basically the size of the list. So word list dot size. So this will specify the upper limit of the random class. So now in the return variable, I can simply provide word list dot get, and as the index I will specify the position. Now I will convert it to uppercase, so that there will be no issues. And I will also call the trim method as well, just so that there will be no additional spaces coming in the first or trailing of the after the word. Okay, now inside our Wordle game constructor, I'm going to initialize our Wordle string by calling this get Wordle string. I'm going to now print that word. Word for the day. Wordle string. Now let's test it out. So first the random word is doing. Now we got the user text now as well as a random Wordle string. Now inside the action performed we can write the logic for comparing the user input to the actual word. So first I'm going to define the user word using a local variable user word, which will fetch the value from the user panel and user input text field and get text. Then I need to split up this user word into individual letters. Now we are only going to proceed with the implementation if the word entered by the user is a 5-letter word or greater. That is why I am first using a check to check if the user length is greater than 4. If the letter is greater than 4, then I will call a custom method to check the Wordle string with the user input word. So I will call this method is Wordle string equal to user word. Now again we will use the trim and convert it to uppercase for the user word. I will create that method. So yeah, I will first correct the default method name to user word for readability, and then first I will split up the Wordle word into a list. Now the only reason I am using a list is so that I can take advantage of the contains method. I know that contains is a little memory intensive application, but since it is a simple application, I think we are okay. We are on the safe here. So using arrays as list, we can generate a list of individual characters. Next, I will create an array of characters for the user string by again splitting by using the regex feature. So now I have the option to compare each of the individual letters from both the Wordle word as well as the user word. Now while iterating over a for loop, I will first define an if condition which checks if the Wordle list contains our first character. The user array's first character. So if it contains, then we have to check if the position of the user word and the position of the word in the Wordle list are same. Okay, so this will compare if the word character at the Wordle list position 0 is equal to the character at user word array position 0. If it is, then we have to change the color to green. Okay, so to do that, I need to fetch the active label array. So if you know, there are 6 word panels, I have to fetch the active panel. So I will create a method get active panel, which will return the current active user panel. So from the user array, word panel array, I will use the count to return the current active word panel. I wrongly top user panel there, sorry. From the array of word panels, I have to fetch the current active word panel. Okay, so I will call the current active panel, and using the set panel text we have created earlier, we will first set the character, that is the user array character at position I, then the position I itself, and now the color will be the color green because both the position and the character are matching. Now in the else case, that means the character from the user word is present in the word list but is not in the exact position. That means the word is correct. So I will change, we will use the same logic, but the color will be yellow. Okay, and then for the else condition for contains, that is the character is not at all present in the word list, then we have to change the color to black. So actually black will be very hard to read, so I will be changing it to gray. Okay, so that logic is also fine. Now I will call, since it is a is check, it is supposed to return a true or false boolean as the naming convention is. We are checking if something is equals, so it should return a boolean. So for returning the value, I will first create another list holding a set of boolean values. My idea here is that for each time the individual letters are combined, the result will be stored in this list. So I will call this list word match list. So only if both the position and the character are matching, then I will add to the word match list the boolean true. Okay, for all other cases the value will be false. So in a sense, if the entire word, user input word, matches the Wordle word, then only that list will be having value true. Else the value there will be some characters which will be having values as false. So my return statement will simply check if there are any false entries present in this list. So Wordle list dot contains false, and then add a not also as well. So if there are any false entries present, then the return will be false. That means Wordle word is not equal to user input word. If there are no false entries present, that means all the time condition 118 met, and we will be getting the exact match, Wordle word equal to user word. Okay, so pretty simple logic, right? Now first I have to increment the count to keep track of the active plane. So I will do that by incrementing the count each time the action performed method is called. So each time the OK button is pressed, the count will be incremented. Then see, now stick, no issues, newly, no issues there. Now if I enter the correct word, newly, all the values are coming as green. So the logic is working flawlessly. Now moving on, we have to now modify the action performed to display the pop-up message whenever a successful entry is detected. So I will modify the method as a condition check and using J option plane show an information message. You see, message dialog. Okay, I will pass the component as null so that it will be independent. Then the message you win and the title, congratulations. And as the type of the message, it will be an information message. Okay, and then add a return statement. So no further execution will happen if the word is matching. Now if we have to also take into account what will happen if the user fails to identify the word after 6 attempts. So we have to add a condition check for counter greater than 5. So from 0 we are starting, so up by 5 it means all 6 attempts are completed. Then we have to show the message we have lost and so, oops, sorry, better luck next time. And also the game should end basically. So game frame dot dispose. Okay, I accidentally deleted the counting there, so adding it back. So now the logic for the information message is also added. Now we have to remember, if we win, the words displayed in the UI should be clear. So you have to add a new method inside the word panel which will clear that word panel, the active word panel. So I will create a new method, clear word panel, which will set the individual label fields as empty string. I will reuse the for loop and set the text field as empty. Oh, one curly braces mistake. Now, since there is a small orientation issue, I'm going to change the layout of the text in label by using horizontal alignment and aligning it as center. This will take care of the alignment issue. Now inside our main class, I will create another method, clear all panels, which will iterate over the word panel array. Okay, so again we have to use a for loop, but this time we will iterate with the limit from count. So count is keeping track of how many attempts we have done. So we only need to iterate over the arrays which are having words, array elements which are having word. So I less than or equal to count. Now all we need to do is call this clear all panels method just before showing the congrats message. Let's try it out. The word is lower. First I will just try wrong word, maybe. So E is there, so it is storing E as orange. Another word, actor. So O and R is there, and R position is correct, so it is green. Now finally the actual word, lower. Yeah, see, the word columns all got cleared and the message is there. And you can actually take a screenshot if you want, because you haven't added any exit. If you want, we can also add the game frame dot disperse method there, so that the game closes after we hit the OK button. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and if you have any feedback or suggestions, please drop a comment below. Thank you.